By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your mind is too loud to get what you want and the one shift that lets you relax it so the things you've been chasing start moving toward you instead. Picture this. You're lying in bed at 11 p.m., exhausted, phone glowing on your chest, mentally replaying a conversation from 6 hours ago while also worrying about money, while also trying to visualize your dream life because someone on the internet told you that's how manifestation works. That's not relaxation. That's noise wearing a costume. And later in this video, I'm going to show you why the harder most people try to manifest what they want, the further they push it away, a mistake that has nothing to do with belief and everything to do with a switch in your brain you don't even know you're flipping. If any of that sounds familiar, type noise in the comments right now before you forget so I know you're still with me. You wake up and before your feet touch the floor, your thumb is already moving toward your phone. Not because you decided to check it, because your nervous system decided for you before you were even fully awake. Within 90 seconds, you've absorbed a stranger's opinion, a headline designed to alarm you, a photo of someone's vacation, and a notification that makes your stomach tighten for reasons you can't name. You haven't even brushed your teeth, and your mind is already running 6 conversations that aren't happening in the room you're standing in. This is how most people spend their entire day. Not living it, narrating it anxiously to an audience that isn't watching as closely as they think. At work, you rehearse the email before you send it, then reread it 4 times after, scanning for how it might be misread. At home, you replay what your coworker said in the meeting, wondering if the pause before they answered meant something. In the car, in the shower, in line at the store. There's a low hum of unfinished thinking that never fully shuts off. You call it being on top of things. It's actually the opposite. It's your attention scattered across 100 tiny fires, none of which you are actually putting out. By dinner, you're tired in a way that has nothing to do with physical effort. You didn't lift anything heavy, you didn't run anywhere. You just spent 9 hours managing a low-grade emergency that mostly existed in your own head, and somehow that's more draining than actual labor. Your family asks how your day was, and you say busy, because busy is easier to explain than I spent most of it arguing with people who weren't in the room. Then you get into bed and the same loop starts again, quieter this time but no less relentless. Here's what it costs you, specifically. It costs you energy, the kind you need for the actual work of building the life you want, spent instead on imaginary arguments with people who aren't in the room. It costs you self-respect, because every time you replay a moment wondering if you looked foolish, you're quietly voting that their opinion matters more than your own peace. And it costs you time, because a mind that's this loud can't notice the quiet, obvious opportunity sitting right in front of it, the email you should send, the person you should call, the idea you had at 2 a.m. and dismissed by morning. Marcus Aurelius, journaling privately to himself nearly 2,000 years ago, kept returning to one blunt observation. Most of the suffering he saw in people wasn't caused by the world doing something to them. It was caused by the story they were telling themselves about the world, running on a loop, uninvited. He wasn't talking about ignoring reality, he was pointing out that the mind adds a second layer of pain on top of the first one, and that second layer is optional. You can't always choose what happens. You can always choose whether you keep narrating it after it's already over. That's the actual problem underneath the phone scrolling, the replaying, the low hum of anxious noise. It's not that your life is too chaotic to relax. It's that your mind has never been given permission to stop adding commentary. And until it does, you're not manifesting anything, you're just broadcasting static and calling it a signal. So here's the idea this entire video is built around, and I want to state it plainly, because most manifestation content buries it under crystals and vision boards until it stops meaning anything. A relaxed mind is not a reward for getting what you want. It's the mechanism that lets you get it. Not motivation, not hustle, not forcing a feeling of abundance you don't actually have. Stillness first, everything else follows from there. Let's be clear about what this does not mean, because the obvious objection is coming and I'd rather meet it head on. This does not mean sitting on a cushion hoping money appears in your mailbox. It does not mean passivity, positive thinking as a substitute for action, or pretending problems away. A calm mind that does nothing manifests nothing. What we're talking about is different. It's removing the internal static so that when action is required, you can actually see what needs doing and do it, instead of spending all your energy managing anxiety about doing it. This directly opposes the behavior our culture actually rewards. We reward busyness. We reward the person who answers emails at midnight, who has 17 tabs open, who talks about how crazy their week is like it's a badge. Anxious hustle gets applause. Quiet, deliberate calm gets mistaken for laziness. But watch closely and you'll notice something. The people who actually build the life everyone else is chasing rarely look frantic while they do it. They look strangely unbothered. That's not an accident. That's the whole mechanism hiding in plain sight. Think about the last time you met someone who was genuinely calm under real pressure, not faking it, not performing composure, actually calm. Chances are you trusted them more in that moment than you trust most people who are visibly working hard to convince you they're in control. Calm reads as capability, frantic reads as struggling, and yet almost everyone defaults to performing the frantic version because it's the version that gets noticed, praised, rewarded with sympathy when it doesn't work out. Nobody throws you a party for staying quietly steady, but steady is the one that actually gets you where you're going. The first piece of this is the easiest to see and the hardest to actually practice. You have to stop reacting to things that were never yours to control. Think about your last argument in a group chat, or the meeting where someone took credit for your idea, or the moment your flight got delayed and your whole afternoon fell apart. In each case, some tiny portion of what happened was actually yours to influence. Almost all of your suffering afterward came from the part that wasn't the other person's opinion of you, the airline scheduling, the past, which cannot be edited no matter how many times you replay it. Picture a normal Tuesday. You send a text to a friend. 3 hours pass, no reply. By hour 2, you've written and deleted 4 follow-up messages in your head, each one slightly more casual than the last, each one designed to hide how much you're actually thinking about this. You've built an entire narrative, they're annoyed with you, you said something wrong, the friendship is cooling from a single piece of information. Silence. That's it. That's all you actually have. Everything else is a story you wrote and then reacted to as if someone else told it to you. Meanwhile, your friend is stuck in a meeting or asleep or simply living their day without a single thought devoted to you, because that's what most people are actually doing most of the time, living their own lives, not building a case against you in their heads, the way you've quietly built one against yourself. The gap between what's real and what you're feeling is enormous, and you're the only one standing inside it. Epictetus, a man who spent part of his life enslaved and still somehow ended up teaching some of the calmest thinking in human history, built his entire philosophy around one distinction: some things are up to you and some things are not. Your opinions, your effort, your response up to you. Other people's opinions, the outcome, the timing not up to you, no matter how much energy you throw at them. His argument wasn't that you should stop caring. It was that you should stop spending your one resource, attention, on things attention cannot change. There's a real psychological pattern hiding underneath that 3-hour spiral, and it has a name: the spotlight effect. It's the well-documented tendency to believe other people are noticing and judging you far more than they actually are. You remember the awkward pause in the meeting for a week, the other person forgot it by lunch. Your brain is convinced you're the main character in everyone else's story, when in reality most people are far too busy running the exact same anxious loop about themselves to spend much time thinking about you at all. Here's the reframe, and I want you to actually sit with this one. The silence, the pause, the delay, it was never a verdict on you. It was just silence. You supplied the meaning, which means you can also decline to supply it. That's not denial, that's just accuracy. Think about how much of your week is spent this way, reacting to information that hasn't actually arrived yet. A boss's neutral tone in an email gets read as disappointment. A friend's shorter than usual reply gets read as distance. None of it is confirmed. All of it gets treated as confirmed, because an anxious mind would rather have a bad answer than no answer at all. That's the trade you're making without realizing it's certainty over accuracy every single time. Starting today, try this. The next time you catch yourself spiraling over something outside your control, a text, a look, a delay, ask one question before you keep narrating. Is this actually happening, or am I forecasting? If you're forecasting, you're allowed to stop. Nobody's forcing you to finish that story. Let me ask you something directly. How much of what you're carrying right now, today, is an actual problem in front of you versus a problem you're pre-living in advance, just in case? Be honest. For most people, the number is uncomfortable. That's not a flaw in you. That's just what an untrained mind does by default. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means nobody ever taught you the off switch. The second layer goes deeper than reacting to random moments. It's about the mind you're in constantly, without a specific trigger at all. Comparison. You open an app for 90 seconds and somehow leave feeling behind in life. Not because anything happened to you, because you watched a highlight reel of 12 other people's best moments stacked end to end, and your nervous system quietly filed it as, this is what normal looks like, and you are not normal. Picture a Sunday afternoon, you're not doing anything wrong, you're just scrolling, mildly bored, and you land on someone announcing a promotion, someone else on a beach in a country you've never been to, someone else looking effortlessly put together at 9 a.m. on a weekend. None of this was aimed at you. But your mind runs a silent comparison anyway, and by the time you put the phone down, you feel smaller than you did 10 minutes ago for no reason you can point to out loud. Or picture a dinner with old friends, the kind that should feel warm and easy. Somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, someone mentions a house they just bought, and you smile and say something congratulatory and mean it. Mostly, but underneath the smile, a quiet calculation starts running. Where am I compared to this? Am I behind? You didn't invite the calculation, it just started. Automatically, the way a smoke alarm goes off from burnt toast instead of an actual fire. Seneca wrote to a friend once about the danger of constantly measuring your life against other people's, pointing out that if you keep your eyes fixed on what everyone else has, you'll never actually notice what you already hold in your own hands. He wasn't writing about social media, obviously. He was writing about Rome, about wealthy men who owned more than they could ever use and still felt poor because someone else owned slightly more. The technology changed, the trap didn't. Psychologists call the underlying mechanism social comparison theory, the idea that human beings figure out their own worth largely by measuring themselves against others, especially when they're uncertain. It's not vanity. It's how the mind evaluates itself when it doesn't have a fixed internal reference point. The problem is that the comparisons we make online are almost never fair. You're comparing your unfiltered Tuesday to someone else's curated highlight, and the math was rigged before you even opened the app. Here's the reframe. Feeling behind doesn't mean you are behind. It means you just ran a comparison against a sample that was never representative in the first place. That feeling is data about the comparison, not data about your life. Here's a concrete move for today. Before you open any app that shows you other people's lives, name one specific thing that's actually true and good in your own day, not big, just true. A meal, a conversation, a task finished. Do it before you scroll, not after. It changes what you're measuring against. Notice too that the people whose highlight reels sting the most are usually the ones closest to your own life. Not celebrities, but people your age, in your field, living lives that look like a version of yours slightly further along. That's not a coincidence. Comparison hits hardest when the gap feels closable, because a closable gap feels like a verdict on your effort instead of just a difference in timing. It isn't a verdict. It's a snapshot taken at a single moment of someone else's much longer and much messier story that you're only seeing the finished part of. Now here's where this gets sharper and where most people quietly resist what I'm about to say, because it doesn't feel like relaxing, it feels like giving something up. The third layer isn't reacting to a moment, and it isn't comparing yourself to others. It's the grip you have on the outcome you want. The tighter you hold something, the less room you leave for it to actually happen. Think about the last time you really wanted something, a job offer, a reply from someone you liked, a specific number in your bank account by a specific date. Notice what your mind did with it. It probably didn't just want it. It attached your worth to it. You checked your email every 20 minutes, you rehearsed what it would mean if it worked out and what it would mean about you if it didn't. The wanting stopped being hope and became a kind of low-grade emergency running in the background of everything else you did. Or picture waiting to hear back after a first date that actually went well for once. You told yourself you wouldn't check your phone every few minutes. You checked it every few minutes. Each unanswered hour got quietly translated into a verdict about you: too much, not enough, forgettable, when in reality it was probably just someone living their Tuesday, exactly the way you were trying and failing to live yours. That emergency feeling is not neutral. People can sense it, even when you think you're hiding it well. Desperation has a frequency. An interviewer feels it in a slightly too eager answer. A date feels it in a message sent 40 seconds after theirs. And ironically, the more visibly desperate you are for an outcome, the less trustworthy and attractive that outcome tends to find you, not because the universe is punishing you, but because clinging behavior reads to other humans and honestly to your own nervous system as scarcity. And scarcity repels. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea constantly in his own private writing. Hold things the way you'd hold water in an open hand, not a clenched fist. Grip water too tightly and it escapes between your fingers faster. He wasn't talking about giving up on outcomes. He was pointing out that the tighter your grip, the less control you actually have, and worse, the more of yourself you damage in the holding. There's a well-documented psychological pattern that explains part of why this grip is so hard to loosen, called cognitive dissonance, the deep discomfort we feel when our beliefs and our reality don't match, and the lengths we'll go to resolve that discomfort, even if it means distorting reality to fit the belief instead of the other way around. If you've decided I need this specific outcome to be okay, and the outcome is uncertain, your mind doesn't sit calmly with that gap. It fills it with anxious checking, with over-preparing, with 100 small compulsive behaviors that feel like control, but are actually just noise dressed up as effort. Here's the reframe, and I want it to land clearly. Wanting something badly is not the problem. Needing it to be okay is the problem. You can want a specific outcome with your whole chest and still be fine, genuinely fine, if it doesn't happen. Those two things are not contradictions. Most people have just never been shown they're allowed to hold both at once. Starting today, pick the one outcome you're gripping tightest right now, do the next real action toward it, send the message, submit the application, have the conversation, and then deliberately stop checking. Not forever, just until there's actually new information. The checking isn't progress, it's just friction, dressed up as diligence. Here's the counterintuitive part, and it's worth pausing on. The people who seem to get what they want without visibly struggling for it aren't lucky, and they aren't secretly indifferent. They've just separated the wanting from the checking. They act with full commitment and then step back with full patience, and from the outside those two things look like the same calm posture, even though internally one is effort and the other is release. Most people only ever learn the first half. If you've made it this far, you already think differently than most people watching this. Most viewers don't make it past the first few minutes of a video like this one, and you're still here, which tells me something about you. So do me one favor before we go further. Hit like on this video right now, not because I'm asking nicely, but because it's a genuinely useful signal to your own future self. It marks this moment, this idea, as one worth coming back to. And since you've stuck around this long, it's time I actually show you why trying hard to manifest something backfires for most people. The thing I promised you at the very start. It's coming up next, and it ties directly into the grip you just loosened. Here's the part almost nobody tells you because it sounds backwards on its surface. The more visibly you try to manifest something, the more you often push it away, and it's not because you don't believe hard enough, or because your vibration is off, or any of the other language that gets thrown around, language that sounds meaningful right up until you ask someone to explain the actual mechanism behind it, and they can't. It's because trying, in the anxious, forceful sense, is itself a signal to your nervous system that the thing is missing. Every time you visualize the money you don't have with the knot in your stomach, every time you picture the relationship you don't have while feeling the ache of not having it, you're not rehearsing abundance. You're rehearsing lack in vivid detail on a loop. This is where identity comes in, and it's sharper than anything we've covered so far. Most people try to manifest the result. Calmer, more effective people become the kind of person for whom that result is simply consistent with who they already are. There's a real difference between I really want to be someone who runs their own business and I am right now someone who handles their responsibilities like someone who runs their own business. The first is a wish held at arm's length. The second changes your actual behavior today in small, boring, unglamorous ways nobody's watching. Picture two people applying for the same opportunity. One spends the morning visualizing the outcome, rehearsing acceptance speeches in their head, checking their phone every few minutes for a response that isn't coming yet. The other spends the morning doing the work that a person who already has that opportunity would be doing, refining the skill, making the follow-up call, showing up prepared. Same desire, completely different relationship to it. Only one of them is actually building the thing they claim to want. Or picture someone who says, every January, that this is the year they finally get in shape and means it, genuinely with real emotion behind it. But the identity underneath hasn't shifted. They're still someone who skips workouts when they're tired, still someone who treats exercise as a debt they owe rather than something they simply do, the way they brush their teeth without negotiating with themselves about it first. The wanting was sincere. The identity never changed. And identity, not sincerity, is what determines the outcome 6 months later. Epictetus made a version of this argument that still holds up perfectly today. You become what you repeatedly do, not what you repeatedly wish for. He'd have had no patience for vision boards divorced from daily action. His whole philosophy was built on the idea that character is constructed in small, repeated choices: how you respond to a delay, how you treat someone who can't do anything for you, how you speak to yourself when no one's listening. Wanting was never the mechanism. Behavior, repeated until it becomes identity, was always the mechanism. There's a real psychological concept underneath this, the self-fulfilling prophecy, the way our expectations about ourselves quietly shape our behavior in ways that make those expectations more likely to come true. If you believe at the identity level that you're someone who follows through, you unconsciously make dozens of small choices every day that confirm it. If you believe you're someone who almost gets there but falls short, you'll unconsciously make choices, small delays, small excuses that confirm that instead. The belief isn't just a feeling, it's a quiet architect working in the background of every decision you don't think twice about. Here's the reframe: you don't need to force yourself to feel abundant before you have abundance. That's backwards, and it's exhausting, and it's why so many people quit manifestation practices feeling like frauds. What you need is to act today in the small and specific ways that the person who already has what you want would act, and let the feeling catch up to the behavior, instead of demanding the feeling show up first. Here's the move. Pick one outcome you want. Write down one thing that person, the version of you who already has it, would do today. That has nothing to do with checking, wishing, or visualizing. Something concrete. Then go do that thing today, regardless of how you feel about your odds. The feeling will follow the behavior. It almost never happens the other way around. This is also where most manifestation advice quietly falls apart, because it asks you to feel abundant first, as if the feeling is a password you need before the door opens. You don't need to feel like a different person before you're allowed to act like one. You just start acting like one in small, unglamorous, unwitnessed ways, and somewhere in the repetition, not the first day, not even the 10th, the feeling shows up on its own, uninvited, because it's finally telling the truth about who you've actually become. Now here's the paradox, and this is the piece that ties everything else together, because it's the sharpest and most uncomfortable idea in this entire video. Relaxing your mind and manifesting what you want are not two separate skills you're building at the same time. Relaxing is the manifesting, not a nice mood you have while you wait for results, the actual mechanism itself. Think about it this way. When your mind is loud, reacting to things outside your control, comparing yourself to curated fragments of other people's lives, gripping tightly to outcomes, performing abundance instead of embodying it, you are quite literally too occupied to notice the door that's already open. The email you should have replied to sooner. The person mentioning a job that's perfect for you in a conversation you were half listening to because your mind was somewhere else. The idea that occurred to you weeks ago and got buried under 17 other anxious thoughts before you could act on it. A relaxed mind isn't passive. It's the only kind of mind with enough spare attention left to actually see what's already available. This is the part that backfires for people who try the obvious way, the thing I promised you at the start of this video. They think manifesting means adding something, more visualization, more affirmations, more effort, more forcing a feeling that isn't really there. But the actual mechanism is subtractive. It's removing the static, not adding more signal on top of it. You don't manifest by trying harder. You manifest by getting quiet enough and steady enough to finally notice what's already in front of you and then acting on it without hesitation. Grip loosens, noise drops, and what's left underneath all of it was capability that was there the entire time, just buried under commentary. Think about how strange this actually is. Once you see it clearly, the thing you were told would take more effort, more affirmations, more visualization, more forcing yourself to feel a certain way, actually takes less. Once you understand the mechanism correctly, not less commitment, less noise. You still act, you still show up, you still send the message, you still do the work. What you stop doing is the exhausting side project of managing your own anxiety about whether it's going to work, which was never part of the actual task in the first place. It was just weight you'd been carrying alongside it, mistaking the weight for effort. Here's what your life actually looks like once this becomes real for you, and I want you to really picture it because this isn't abstract. You wake up and your hand doesn't move toward your phone out of reflex, it moves when you decide it should. There's a gap now, a small quiet gap between what happens to you and how you respond to it. And that gap is where your whole life actually gets to happen. You read a message that used to send you spiraling for hours, and you notice the old pull start, and then you notice it pass, because you're not required to follow every pull your mind offers you anymore. You walk into a room and you're not performing anymore. You're not scanning for how you're being perceived, not rehearsing your next sentence 3 exchanges in advance. You're just there, actually there. And strangely, people respond to that. Not because you try to be magnetic, because you stop broadcasting static long enough for people to feel the signal underneath it. You want things, you still want things, a bigger life, more money, someone specific, somewhere else to live, and here's what's different. The wanting doesn't run your nervous system anymore. It sits quietly alongside everything else you're doing instead of sitting on top of it, crowding out your ability to actually function in the meantime. You take the next real step, you send the message, you do the work, and then you let go of the outcome the way you'd let go of a bird instead of gripping it, because you've learned the hard way that gripping never got you the outcome faster, only more exhausted on the way there. And when things do arrive, the opportunity, the reply, the shift you'd been quietly working toward it doesn't feel like a miracle you don't understand. It feels obvious in hindsight, like it was always going to happen once you got out of your own way. You notice yourself finishing things you used to abandon halfway through, not because you found more discipline somewhere, but because half your energy used to leak out through worry, and now it doesn't, so there's simply more of you left over for the actual work. Opportunities that used to slip past unnoticed, a comment someone made in passing. An opening you'd have been too distracted to see start landing differently, because a quiet mind has room to catch them. People start describing you as lucky. You know better, you just stop being too loud to notice what was already there. None of this means life gets easier or quieter, or that the chaos outside you disappears. Your inbox still fills up. People still disappoint you sometimes. Delays still happen, plans still change without asking your permission first. What changes is not the weather around you. What changes is that you stop mistaking the weather for an emergency every single time it shifts. You become the calm point the chaos moves around, instead of one more piece of debris caught inside it. So here's your challenge, and I want you to actually do this, not just nod along and close the tab. For the next 7 days, every single time you catch your mind gripping something, an outcome, a comparison, a replay of something that already happened and can't be changed, say one sentence to yourself silently. Not up to me, only my next action is. Then take that next action and let the rest go. Just 7 days, watch what happens to the noise in your head, and watch, strangely,